March 3rd, 1944, 22:47 hours, 18,000 feet above the Ruhr Valley. The Messerschmitt Bf-110 climbs through frozen darkness. Inside the cramped cockpit, Paul Semrau's breath clouds the instrument panel. His radio operator, Wilhelm Gansler, crouches behind him in silence. They are hunting. Below them, the sky pulses orange. 400 Lancaster bombers hammer Essen into rubble. The drone of Merlin engines fills the night like industrial thunder. Semrau banks left, scanning upward through the canopy glass. Nothing. The bombers fly in defensive boxes, each gunner covering the blind spots of 3 others. Standard doctrine says attack from behind and below. Every manual, every training film, every veteran instructor repeats it. Stern approach, deflection shot. Break away before the tail gunner finds you. Semrau ignores all of it. He throttles forward, pushing the Bf-110 directly beneath a Lancaster's belly. The bomber's silhouette blocks the stars. He is close enough to see rivets, close enough to count the bomb bay doors, close enough that any defensive gunner with a clear line of sight would shred his aircraft in seconds. But there are no shots. Semrau reaches overhead and grips a metal lever welded to the canopy frame. It connects to 2 20-mm cannons, mounted upward at a 70-degree angle, barrels pointed at the sky instead of forward. His armorer laughed when he installed them. His squadron commander called it absurd. Command refused to make it official doctrine. He pulls the trigger. The cannons roar. Shell casings clatter against the cockpit floor. Tracer rounds climb vertically into the Lancaster's fuel tanks. The bomber doesn't return fire. It doesn't dive. It doesn't evade. It simply ignites. Semrau banks hard right as burning fuel rains past his canopy. Gansler's voice crackles through the intercom. 1. Semrau climbs again, scanning for the next silhouette. There, another Lancaster, 400 meters ahead, steady on course. He slides beneath it like a shark rising from black water. Another squeeze, another explosion. The bomber breaks apart before its crew realizes they are dying. 2. The night becomes a mechanical rhythm. Climb, align, fire, bank, climb again. The upward-firing cannons turn the bomber stream into a shooting gallery. Semrau's hands move without thought. His eyes track only shapes and distances. The cold air smells like cordite and burning oil. 3 minutes and 40 seconds after the first trigger pull, 9 Lancaster bombers are falling from the sky. 9 crews, 63 men. None of them saw the gun that killed them, and no one in Allied intelligence will believe it happened. Rewind to October 1943. The Allied strategic bombing campaign against Nazi Germany has reached industrial scale. Every night, hundreds of heavy bombers cross the North Sea, navigate by starlight and dead reckoning, and unload thousands of tons of high explosives on German cities: Berlin, Hamburg, Cologne, Essen. The Ruhr Valley glows like a forge. Germany's night fighter force is bleeding to death. The Luftwaffe fields approximately 400 night fighters, twin-engine, Bf-110s and Ju-88s equipped with radar, heavy cannons, and experienced crews. On paper, they should dominate. But the mathematics of aerial combat are brutally simple. Every attack from the rear gives the bomber's tail gunner a 3-second window to kill you first. British tail gunners sit in powered turrets armed with 4 303 Browning machine guns. They train for this exact engagement. They are good at it. In September 1943 alone, the Luftwaffe loses 47 night fighters in combat. Another 23 are damaged beyond repair. Crew losses exceed 120 men. The kill-to-loss ratio favors the defense, but only barely. For every 5 bombers destroyed, 1 night fighter is shot down. The bomber crews have parachutes and the chance of capture. The fighter crews have a 5-second fall into German soil. The standard attack profile is this: approach from the rear and below, where the bomber's belly offers minimal defensive coverage. Climb into firing position at 200 meters. Open fire with forward-mounted cannons. Hold the trigger for 2 seconds. Break away before the tail gunner corrects his aim. If you are lucky, the bomber catches fire. If you are not, the tail gunner hits your engine and you glide toward a field you will never see. The problem is obvious. Every attack requires exposing your aircraft to defensive fire. Every engagement is a dice roll. Every sortie costs pilots their nerves, their fuel, their luck. The system works, but it is killing them as surely as it kills the bombers, and the bomber stream grows larger every week. By late 1943, Luftwaffe night fighter crews are exhausted. New pilots last an average of 7 sorties. Veterans develop tremors. Some refuse to fly, others drink before missions to dull the fear. Command issues directives, updates tactics, redistributes squadrons. None of it changes the mathematics. The rule is clear: attack from the rear. That rule is written in blood, and that rule is killing them. January 1944. Luftwaffe airfield near Bonn. Paul Semrau stands in a hangar, staring at a fuel truck. He is not looking at the truck itself, but at the filler nozzle, which extends upward at an angle from the pump housing. A mechanic is refueling a Ju-88 standing beneath the wing, inserting the nozzle upward into the fuel port. Semrau watches this for 3 full minutes. The idea arrives not as a flash, but as a slow certainty, like ice forming on a windshield. He thinks about the Lancaster's blind spot. Every bomber has one. The fuselage blocks the belly turret's downward angle. The tail turret cannot depress below a certain point. There is a cone of empty air directly beneath the aircraft where no gun can reach. Standard doctrine says, climb into that cone from behind. Fire forward, escape before the tail gunner adjusts. But what if you didn't fire forward? What if you stayed in the blind spot and fired upward? Semrau walks to his Bf-110 and climbs onto the wing. He lies on his back, looking up at the underside of the canopy frame. The structure is steel tubing, reinforced, strong enough to support additional weight. He imagines 2 cannons welded there, angled upward at 70 degrees. No need to aim through the gun sight. No need to calculate deflection. Just fly beneath the target and pull a trigger mounted to the canopy roof. It is absurd. No training manual describes this. No tactical doctrine includes it. The idea violates every principle of fighter combat. Forward-facing guns, high-speed engagement, aggressive maneuvering. This is the opposite. This is passive, predatory, a shark feeding from below. But it makes perfect sense. The next morning, Semrau approaches his armorer, a Bavarian mechanic named Schubert, who has been servicing Bf-110s since the Polish campaign. Semrau sketches the concept on a scrap of paper. 2 20mm cannons, mounted upward, fixed angle, manual trigger. Schubert stares at the drawing for 10 seconds. You want me to mount guns on the ceiling? Yes. Pointed. At the sky? Yes. And you will fly underneath enemy bombers and shoot them in the stomach. Correct. Schubert folds the paper and slides it into his pocket. He does not smile. He does not argue. He simply nods. 3 days. January 21st, 1944. 23:15 hours. 16,000 feet above Düsseldorf. The radar operator's voice crackles through the intercom. Contact. Bearing 270. Range 3 kilometers. Altitude 18,000. Semrau banks left, climbing. The night is moonless, visibility near 0. He flies by instruments, trusting the radar operator's vectors. The Bf-110's engines roar at full throttle. Fuel consumption is catastrophic, but fuel does not matter if you do not survive. 1 kilometer. Steady bearing. Semrau levels off at 17,500 feet and reduces throttle. The bomber stream passes overhead like a river of shadows. He picks a target, a Halifax, flying straight and level, engines unsynchronized, producing a distinctive rhythmic pulse. He throttles back further, bleeding speed, sliding beneath the bomber's flight path. Gansler counts distance. 400 meters, 350, 300. Semrau's hands are steady. The upward-firing cannons are loaded, safety's off. He has never fired them in combat. He has tested them once, on the ground, aiming at a wooden target nailed to a post. They worked. The recoil shook the airframe, but did not crack it. That is all he knows. 200 meters. The Halifax is directly above him now, a black shape against blacker sky. Semrau eases the throttle forward, matching speed. The bomber's engines drown out his own. He is inside the blind spot. No turret moves, no tracer fire arcs toward him. He is invisible. He reaches up and grips the trigger lever. 100. 100 meters, Semrau pulls. The cannons fire in short, controlled bursts. The recoil shudders through the cockpit. Semrau feels the airframe flex but hold. Tracer rounds climb vertically, stitching a line across the Halifax's belly. Sparks bloom where shells puncture aluminum. Fuel tanks rupture. Fire spreads along the fuselage like a lit fuse. The Halifax does not return fire. It does not dive. It simply burns. Semrau banks right, throttling away from the disintegrating bomber. Debris tumbles past his canopy. Shredded metal, burning fabric, a spinning propeller blade. Gansler's voice is calm, almost detached. Confirmed. 1. Semrau climbs again, scanning for the next target. He feels nothing. No adrenaline, no triumph, no fear. Only calculation. The method works. The blind spot is real. The upward angle is perfect. He can do this again. He does it 4 more times that night. 5 bombers in 40 minutes. 0 defensive fire. 0 damage to his aircraft. When Semrau lands at 0130, his fuel tanks are nearly empty. He climbs out of the cockpit and walks to the debriefing room without speaking. The intelligence officer records his claims with visible skepticism. 5 bombers, no damage. No return fire. You are certain? Yes. And you fired upward. Correct. The officer writes this down but does not look convinced. Bomber crews report fighter attacks constantly. Gunners claim kills that never happened. Pilots exaggerate, miscount, confuse explosions with moonlight reflections. This is expected. This is normal. But 5 confirmed kills without taking a single hit? The officer closes his notebook. We will investigate. Semrau says nothing. He already knows what will happen. Command will dismiss it as luck. Fellow pilots will call it fantasy. The upward-firing cannons will remain unofficial, unrecognized, a curiosity in a war too large to notice one mechanic's improvisation, but someone is watching. February 1944. Word spreads through the night fighter squadrons like smoke under a door. Semrau's tactic, mounting cannons upward, attacking from directly below, becomes known by its unofficial name, Schräge Musik, slanted music. The term comes from German jazz slang, describing music played at an angle, off-kilter. Against the rules, it fits. Other pilots begin experimenting. A crew in the 3 NJG-1 mounts a single MG-151 cannon at 60 degrees. Another in IV NJG-1 uses 2 MGFFs at 80 degrees. The installations are crude, improvised, welded by mechanics working off-shift with scrap steel and unofficial orders. No technical manual describes the process. No training film demonstrates the technique. It exists in the gap between doctrine and desperation. But it works. By mid-February, pilots using Schräge Musik report kill ratios tripling. Instead of 1 bomber per sortie, they claim 3, 4. On clear nights with good radar guidance, some crews down 6 targets without sustaining damage. The bomber stream begins to thin. Allied intelligence notices but cannot explain it. Bomber crews report explosions without warning, fires erupting from below, no tracer fire, no visible attackers. Tail gunners scan empty sky. Luftwaffe command remains skeptical. A senior officer from Nachtjagdgeschwader headquarters visits Semrau's squadron in early March. He inspects the upward-firing cannons, walks around the Bf-110, taps the welds with a knuckle. He asks why this modification was not submitted through proper channels, why no official proposal was filed, why pilots are improvising weapon systems without authorization. Semrau stands at attention and says nothing. The officer orders the cannons removed. He cites regulations, unauthorized modifications, void technical certification. If the aircraft crashes, the pilot's family receives no death benefits. If the modification causes structural failure, the mechanic faces court-martial. This is not personal. This is procedure. Semrau waits until the officer leaves. Then he tells Schubert to reinstall the cannons that night. Other squadrons face similar resistance. Some commanders forbid Schräge Musik installations outright. Others tolerate them quietly, filing paperwork that omits the modifications. Pilots teach the technique to each other in private, sketching diagrams on napkins, describing the exact angle, the ideal distance, the moment to fire. It becomes underground knowledge, passed between crews like contraband. The bomber stream continues to shrink. Allied casualty rates spike. In March 1944, Bomber Command loses 94 heavy bombers in a single week. Crews report identical scenarios: no warning, sudden fire, catastrophic explosions. Debriefing officers ask about fighter attacks. Gunners describe nothing. They saw nothing. They fired at nothing. British intelligence begins investigating. Reports circulate about a new German weapon, something invisible, something that strikes from below. Speculation ranges from acoustic mines to radio-guided rockets to upward-firing cannons mounted on night fighters. The last theory sounds absurd. No one designs fighter aircraft with guns that do not point forward. But the theory is correct. By April 1944, approximately 60 Luftwaffe night fighters carry some form of Schräge Musik installation. They operate without official recognition, without standardized design, without tactical doctrine. They exist because pilots refuse to die following rules that do not work. And someone very important is finally paying attention. May 1944. Luftwaffe High Command, Berlin. General Major Josef Kammhuber reviews the casualty reports with mounting disbelief. Night fighter losses have dropped by 30% since February. Bomber kills have increased by 40%. The numbers do not align with any tactical change he authorized. He orders an investigation. The report arrives on his desk 3 days later. It includes technical schematics, combat footage from gun camera film, and sworn testimony from 18 night fighter crews. The conclusion is clear. Pilots have independently developed and deployed a weapon system that bypasses standard defensive coverage. The system is effective, reproducible, and spreading through operational squadrons without official sanction. Kammhuber reads the report twice. Then he picks up a telephone and summons the head of Luftwaffe Technical Development. I need this. Standardized. Design, production, installation. I want it on every night. Fighter by June. The response is cautious. Sir, the modification is unofficial. We have no approved engineering spec. Then make one. That will require... I do not care what it requires. Pilots are welding cannons to cockpit frames with scrap metal and winning. Imagine what they could do with proper equipment. The conversation ends. Within 2 weeks, Schräge Musik transitions from improvisation to official doctrine. Engineers at Messerschmitt design a standardized mounting bracket for the Bf-110. Junkers develops a similar system for the WWII. The installations are refined. Cannons angled at 70 degrees. Ammunition feeds routed through existing channels. Triggers integrated into the control column. Weight distribution is calculated. Structural integrity is tested. The system receives an official designation. Schräge Musik. Type A production begins in June 1944. By July, every operational night fighter in the Luftwaffe carries the upward-firing system. Pilots receive formal training. Tactical manuals are updated. Gun camera footage is analyzed and incorporated into instruction films. The technique that began as one pilot's improvisation becomes standard operating procedure. The impact is immediate. In August 1944, the Luftwaffe shoots down 142 Allied bombers in a single week. Bomber Command adjusts tactics, flying higher, tighter formations, more evasive routes. It does not matter. Schräge Musik-equipped fighters find the blind spot regardless. The weapon is not a surprise anymore, but it remains devastatingly effective. Allied intelligence finally confirms what is happening. Reconnaissance photographs show the upward-angled cannons. Captured Luftwaffe pilots describe the tactic in detail. RAF engineers study the design and realize how simple it is. How obvious. How brutal. British bomber crews are briefed. They are told to watch for attacks from directly below. They are told to fly defensive patterns that minimize blind spots. They are told to survive. But the mathematics have changed. The weapon that no one believed possible has rewritten the rules of night combat. And it started with one pilot, one mechanic, and a fuel truck nozzle. November 1946, Schräge Musik becomes the most successful night fighter weapon system of the war. By autumn 1944, Luftwaffe night fighters equipped with upward-firing cannons account for nearly 60% of all Allied bomber losses over Germany. The system is so effective that Allied countermeasures, improved belly turrets, lower flight altitudes, chaff deployment, only marginally reduce its lethality. The tactic spreads beyond Germany. Japanese night fighters adopt a similar system, mounting upward-firing cannons on Ki-45 and J-1N1 fighters to intercept B-29 bombers over the Pacific. Soviet night bomber crews report identical attacks. Sudden fires, no warning, invisible assailants. The principle is universal. Every aircraft has a blind spot. Every blind spot can be exploited. But the legacy of Schräge Musik extends beyond kill counts. It represents a fundamental shift in military innovation. The weapon was not designed by engineers or ordered by generals. It was improvised by a pilot, refined by a mechanic, and validated by survival. It spread through informal networks, passed from crew to crew, before command ever acknowledged it existed. By the time the system became official, it had already proven itself in combat dozens of times. This pattern, ground-level innovation bypassing bureaucracy, repeats throughout the war. American P-51 pilots jury-rig drop tanks to extend range. Soviet tank crews weld spare armor to vulnerable points. British radar operators develop tactics their commanders never authorized. The soldiers closest to death find solutions faster than the systems designed to support them. Schräge Musik survives the war in doctrine, if not in name. Post-war fighter design incorporates lessons learned from upward-firing systems. The concept of exploiting geometric blind spots becomes foundational in air combat theory. Modern aircraft design prioritizes all-aspect coverage precisely because Schräge Musik proved how lethal gaps can be. Veterans who flew with the system remember it with quiet reverence. In post-war interviews, former Luftwaffe night fighter pilots describe Schräge Musik as the difference between hunting and surviving. One pilot, interviewed in 1987, puts it simply, "Before, we fought the bombers. After, we simply shot them down." British bomber veterans remember it differently. A Lancaster tail gunner, speaking in 1992, describes the terror of watching bombers explode without warning, burning from the inside out. No visible attacker, no defensive option. "We called them ghost fighters," he says. You couldn't see them. You couldn't fight them. You just hoped they chose someone else. By war's end, Schräge Musik installations account for an estimated 2,500 to 3,000 Allied bomber losses. That translates to roughly 20,000 airmen killed or captured. The numbers are estimates, compiled from fragmentary records, cross-referenced casualty reports, intelligence assessments. The exact figure will never be known. What is known? One pilot's refusal to accept doctrine as immutable changed the course of the air war. And yet, for decades after the war, few people outside aviation history circles know the name Paul Semrau. He was not the only pilot to use Schräge Musik. He was not the highest-scoring ace. He did not receive the Knight's Cross or any major decoration. He survived the war, returned to civilian life, and worked as an engineer in post-war Germany. He gave few interviews. He wrote no memoirs. In 1983, a British aviation historian tracked him down and asked about the upward-firing cannons. Semrau's response was brief. It made sense. So we did it. He died in 1989, age 72, largely forgotten outside a small community of veterans and historians, but the weapon he improvised outlived him. March 3, 1944. 22:47 hours return to that moment. The Messerschmitt climbing through frozen darkness. The Lancasters droning overhead. The upward-firing cannons welded to a cockpit frame. 9 bombers falling in 3 minutes. Paul Semrau did not invent Schräge Musik to become famous. He did not do it for medals or recognition or post-war acclaim. He did it because the system was killing his friends, and he refused to accept that as inevitable. War forces impossible choices. It demands that people solve problems with incomplete information, inadequate resources, and zero margin for error. Sometimes those solutions come from headquarters. Sometimes they come from engineers. Sometimes they come from a pilot standing in a hangar, watching a fuel truck, realizing that angles matter more than speed. Schräge Musik succeeded because it was simple. It worked because it exploited geometry, not technology. It spread because pilots trusted each other more than they trusted doctrine. And it saved lives. German lives, at the cost of Allied lives, in a war where both sides bled the same. History remembers the bombers that burned. It remembers the crews that fell. It remembers the night fighters that climbed into darkness and returned with empty guns and full kill counts. But it rarely remembers the mechanic who welded the first mount, or the pilot who flew the first test, or the moment when an absurd idea stopped being absurd and became doctrine. That is what this story preserves. Not the weapon, not the kills, not the strategic impact, the moment, the thought, the refusal to accept death as inevitable when survival requires only seeing the problem from a different angle. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how innovation happens, or how individuals change systems, or how history turns on moments no one notices until later, then hit like. Share where you're watching from. You are helping keep these moments alive. You are ensuring that the Paul Semrau of history do not disappear into footnotes. Because the next time you face an impossible problem, the next time someone tells you, this is how it's always done, the next time a rule seems immutable, remember the upward-firing gun. Sometimes the solution is not ahead of you. Sometimes it is directly above.